everybody. This is Ryan McClanahan with historythroughcards.com. I hope you're all doing very well. So this is going to be a little bit different. I really got kind of interested in what people were saying about a crash, and a lot of collectors and dealers have said over the years a crash is coming, and I wanted to find out where they were getting their historical data from, and I wanted to find out if it was anything like baseball. As you know, baseball is a mirror to American society at any given time, and I wanted to find out if the hobby was a mirror to uh, economics of the country at the time, of anybody who was writing about the hobby. That is. So, in December 1st of 1942, Jefferson Burdick wrote an article in Card Collector's Bulletin, and here's what he had to say. Today's values of U.S. tobacco card issues. The U.S. Card Collector's Catalog was printed 3½ years ago, and card values, as shown therein, were based on the best information and opinions available at that time. The second catalog supplement of slightly over a year ago made note of a general raise in certain varieties, and today's conditions make some further moves in that direction a necessity. While all cards have shown increased activity, the tobacco issues, as in England and elsewhere, have proven the most popular. They are not only becoming more difficult and costly to locate, but the demand is taking them off the market faster than ever. 75% of the last 30 subscribers to the bulletin have ordered complete back files, which means they are active collectors in the market for cards. Several inquiries have come in from persons wanting to buy quote unquote in large quantities at lower rates. Years ago, it was possible to buy in that manner to some extent, but today nearly everybody obtains at least a general idea of value before selling, and snap bargains are the exception. During 1942, at least, 4 collections have changed hands at $70 or more each. Late in September, a collection mounted in an old album was sold in New York City at public auction for $62. This was approximately 40% above the catalog value of the cards, but actually was a fair value for the cards. Bidding was very active, both from the floor and through mail bids. The article continues to say, it may be added that even at the above retail rates, tobacco cards may be considered good values. In these days, much is heard of the investment value of hobby material. It is a safe prediction that these cards will prove as good investments as any. There will always be a strong interest in them, and values have been gradually rising in a healthy manner. Any good collection, if properly handled, should eventually realize as good returns as the better stocks and bonds. Values seem surely destined to go to considerably above their present levels within the next few years. So this is really interesting because what it's telling us is that the hobby is not stagnant. It's actually growing. And you wouldn't think this because the demographic of hobbyists is actually in the military, in the service. But those guys are just participating in the hobby in a different way. For example, Lionel Carter he was grabbing card collectors' bulletins in the Philippines, and he was writing down his wartime experiences in them. Harry Lillian, who was over in the European theater, he was pretty much doing the same thing. The only ones I can think of who were actually collecting cards then was Jefferson Burdick, who wasn't in the service, and then John D. Wagner, who was actually, I think he was born in 1899. So he was one of the oldest, but he was a sergeant in the Army Processing Center in Philadelphia. So he was definitely collecting cards. These guys were just doing it in a different way. They were just following the hobby in a different way. So the other problem too is was that actually it wasn't a problem, but the unemployment rate was dropping. In 1941, it was 9.9%. In 1942, it was 4.7%, and in 1943 is 1.9%. Now here is actually a problem because you may have collectors who had more money in their pockets in the early to mid 40s, but you didn't have any product. And even afterwards, in 1946 and 1947, the, um, there wasn't really much of a hobby because um, collect actually, companies companies were transitioning over from a wartime economy to a peacetime economy, and 1946 and 1947 were still they were down. There was a downturn in the economy, so um, these companies also had uh, wartime contracts that they were still obligated to fulfill, and so Tops still had these contracts up until the Korean War, and Bowman's a little bit different. So Bowman, the company closed its doors in 1943, and then Warren Bowman was voted out of his company at some point. Um, and there was a name change in 1944 as well, and then he also had some personal issues such as a divorce, which was actually very nasty. Um, but I wanted to get back to the economy. So you're not seeing a crash in 1987 stock market crash, and you're not seeing it in the Great Depression either, and you're not seeing it in 9/11 or the 2008 2009 housing market crash. Instead, what looks like it's happening is that the hobby is doing exactly the opposite of what's going on in the economy. So in the 2021 COVID pandemic is actually mirroring what is going on in 1942 when Jefferson Burdick actually says that he's seeing more new collectors enter the hobby. Now we're actually also seeing new collectors enter the hobby today. Um, and I think I was reading somewhere where at the 2021 National, 40% of all the attendees were new to the hobby. Um, and so the only time that the hobby has come close to a crash is the 1994 baseball players strike. Um, and I believe I was reading somewhere where in 1996, when Pinnacle was taken over, they had said that the card companies faced a 40% reduction in sales directly because of the players' strike and because of hockey as well had a players' strike. The first one in 1992, and then again in 1994 and 1995. And it was really, really hard because not only was there a strike, but there was a lot of acquisitions as well. And because of these acquisitions and because of this strike, you had card companies that were trying to come up with different ways to get people like me back. Now, I didn't go back to the modern hobby after 1994 until uh, Dakota from Sports Cards Anonymous lured me back like the dark side of the force. So um, I didn't realize that there were cards like this This is a 1996 Leaf Signature Series that I just picked up, and I did so for historical reasons. The other thing too is, so this particular set was pretty expensive when it first came out. I think a pack was about $10, and I think it did the exact opposite of what the intentions were. Now, the intentions for these card companies, especially in for that set, um, probably weren't on the side of the kids. There weren't too many kids that could afford $10 packs, so that meant that that set was specifically for um, I I would say investors, more than likely. The problem is that cards like this are really cheap today compared to when they were first issued, and that's a different story altogether. But I wanted to get that out there that they have um, a lot to learn in hobby history as far as um, the direction of the hobby going forward when it comes to the junk wax era. And in fact, it looks like junk wax era 2.0, because in all honesty, what we're seeing today mirrors what was going on in the 1990s. Um, but that's another story for another day, and I'm going to cut it off right now, guys, and say thank you very much. I appreciate it, and have a good day.